right. Hey everyone. I know it's been a few weeks, I think, since I did my last review, and I know I said on Twitter that I was planning on doing this review Thursday at the earliest, but I kind of figured that since I feel very familiar with this movie, as you can see below that I'm reviewing, I kind of figured why wait, you know? And for every week of October leading up to Halloween, I'm going to be reviewing horror films. And keep in mind that all the horror films I plan on reviewing, I have actually seen before. I think the only one I haven't seen all the way through, but know the ending anyway, is The Exorcist. And yeah, a lot of these. I think the last thing I'll say before I get into my analysis on Nightmare on Elm Street is that most of these movies before I've seen all the way through, and so I already have like a preconceived idea of what to expect, but that's not going to change my opinions all that much. So, with that said, let's dive into A Nightmare on Elm Street. So, right off the bat, I just want to say that the plot I think everyone who knows the movie or is gonna watch this review knows the plot of the movie. So basically, I'm just gonna say it anyway in case someone happens to be watching this and has no clue whatsoever. So the whole plot of this movie is that this dream demon is stalking and murdering teenagers in Miscellaneousville, USA, as revenge for their parents killing the demon when he was still alive for getting off clean from child murder charges. And I know that in later movies they say it's Springwood, but it is kind of weird when they say it's in Springwood and that town is known to be in Ohio, and yet you see palm trees in the background in the first movie, and it looks like freaking California. So that's just kind of laughable in a way. But to be fair, that is they don't mention it that much in the first movie. They do hint that it's in California when they start talking about earthquakes, but I'm wasting 3 minutes of this review with digressions. Anyway, so basically the plot is the characters are being picked off one by one, and this one teenager, Nancy Thompson, is the sole character that's figures out what's going on and is trying to find ways to beat up and defeat this dream monster. So this is a movie that launched one of the most iconic horror movie franchises, not just in the 80s, but of all time in general. And for Freddy Krueger's debut, you don't really see him that much in the movies, but they do kind of set up some character traits that would carry over into other films, like his appearance, the fact that he likes to make dark jokes while trying to kill someone, and I will say, for the most part, the movie it does a really good job at creating this very creepy, uncomfortable atmosphere. There's a lot of scenes, even if they just end up being fake out jump scares. There are a lot of scenes that create tension, make you scared because you know that this is a horror movie, and then the payoff usually works all the time. And this is one of those movies where they use the jump scares effectively because they don't use them that often. They only use them when a scene calls for a jump scare, you know? And I will give credit that as stupid as a lot of the characters are in the movie, I will say this that Nancy Thompson's character, I think she's very comparable to Ripley in the Alien movies because she is a strong character. She fights off the monster, and she becomes more of an interesting character as the movie progresses. Because at the beginning of the movie, she's just kind of this innocent, unassuming teenager, and Heather Langenkamp said this is her favorite performance of hers. I will say this is definitely a really good starting off point, but I haven't seen any of her other movies yet, so I wouldn't be able to judge all that well. But this was definitely one of her earlier movies, and she did a very fantastic job. The character was written very well, And it was a combination of good writing, good directing, and good acting from Wes Craven and Langenkamp that managed to give us a very strong character. The other teenage characters in this movie, including Johnny Depp in his film debut at the time, yeah, they're doing good at making the characters believable enough, but it would be a stretch to call them the other performers, the other teen actors great in the movie. I mean, really, Johnny Depp and the other characters of the other teens in the movie, they're really just there just to die. You know, as you watch the movie, you kind of understand that they're just the cannon fodder for Freddy to kill off before the final showdown with Nancy. And I will say this: there is one huge complaint I do have with the movie, and it doesn't have to do with the teenagers per se, but more so the parents. And I'll say this: at first, for those of you who've seen the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. But at first, when the parents see what's going on and they see all the murders happening, again with Freddy killing people in their dreams, but to them it looks like someone else, like it looks like one of the teens was responsible for murdering their girlfriend, and then said murderer hangs himself in the jail cell. I will say this though: up to a certain point, I can understand why the parents wouldn't believe Nancy when she's trying to tell them what's going on. You know, I think the point where I sort of tap out with believing the parents' disbelief is the scene where Nancy's mom takes her to a laboratory to study her sleeping patterns after everything has really gone nuts. And then Nancy starts freaking out, spazzing, and I would also argue kind of convulsing a little bit. She whips out the hat from Freddy Krueger, and it's like it's been established that when she came in, the hat wasn't with her. And so the mom is trying to deny that verifiable evidence that this guy is still around spiritually. Okay, that's pretty. I get they're trying to say that the mom's in denial because she's horrified, but at the same time, there's only so much denial you can put yourself through before the alarm clock goes off in your head and you start realizing that you got to do something more than just pretend it's not a problem. Another thing I don't really understand is if you killed a child murderer, why would you keep his weapon that he used in your basement? I mean, that's that's not as big as the other flaw I pointed out, but it's just because I mean, if I was a part of a mob and I killed a child murderer as revenge for him getting let off without facing any real consequences, I wouldn't keep his murder weapon in my basement where I could possibly find it or my kid could stumble across it. That's just, I mean, that's just one of those things where it's like, even for a movie that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I think this might be a good segue to get into the story about Freddy Krueger. Robert Englund, this is probably the role that he will always be remembered for. And he did a good job at, because this movie was trying to go against the grain of having this serial killer in the movie be this silent, emotionless monster. And they changed that by, like I said, making Freddy a bit of a jokester, someone who likes to, you know, screw around with the victims before he actually slashes them to death. And I think Robert Englund, you could definitely tell he's having a lot of fun with the role. And even as you would see him in later movies, you can still tell that fun and that passion is coming through the performance. In this movie, even though you see him sparingly throughout the movie, I think I read somewhere he's only in 8 minutes of the film, and I will say it was a solid introduction. It was definitely something that was a gateway to many other fun stories. Um, the special effects for a movie that didn't have that big of a budget, they managed to do a good job with making convincing effects throughout the movie. Like the scene where you see Freddy pressing through the wall over the bed that Nancy's sleeping. it looks kind of phony, but it still looks a lot more convincing than the shot you see in the remake. And I've seen that clip of the remake, and I haven't seen all of that yet. But anyway, so England did a good job. I do like how the movie does. Another thing I like about the movie is that it does a good job at toying with your idea of what's actually happening and what's really just a dream. Because the whole logic of you die in your dreams, you die for real. There's very seamless blending of reality, so you don't really know how much of this is actually happening and how much of it is a dream horror. And for that, let's get into the ending, which will be the last thing I talk about. And I've been going on for about 11 minutes now. The ending, I don't. I'll try my best not to give it away. At first, the ending, it seems like it's a happy ending, and Wes Craven said that he wanted the ending to be where the whole movie was just a dream that Nancy was having. That would have been a real cop out because that would have sort of discredited all the horror and anguish that the audience was going through with Nancy. So I'm kind of happy that they went with the surprise bad ending as much as Wes Craven hated the ending. But I think it kind of made a little bit more of an interesting story because even though the movie set up specific rules, like if you fall asleep, Freddy can get you, and if he gets you, you're dead in the end. So I can understand those rules, but I kind of like how, like I said, when they're blurring reality, I kind of like having this more mysterious, ominous ending because we've seen a lot of movies that have happy endings before. I like happy endings, but sometimes it's better to have a little more of a variety, and I think this kind of makes the film a little unique in a way because I think a lot of horror movies, even Friday the 13th, that one had a happy ending with the main character surviving the onslaught and then waking up in a hospital bed. So I think it is kind of unique to see one of the few horror movies where there is no happy ending, but it's more scary and ambiguous. So that is my review for Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm not sure what movie I'll be reviewing next week. It's probably I'd have to look. I got a few other ideas for later in the month, but next week I'm not so sure. Uh, Excuse me, and thank you for watching, and hopefully this will be the first of many movie reviews I get back to doing. See ya.